Has that told you it's recording now?
It has, yeah. Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Right, well, we'll make a start then. So thanks for everybody for coming. And as Nick said, we've got a slight technical hitch with one of the speakers. So we're going to reverse the order of the talks today. But it's great that we've got two talks about the role that volunteers can play in developing and enriching cultural archival collections, and on the ways in which unpaid volunteers can contribute and also are valued in projects. So the first speaker is actually going to be Kath McGrath. Kath is the project manager on the Dialect and Heritage project here at Leeds. And she's going to talk about the project, about the rich dialect archives that are held at the university, and to talk a little bit about how volunteers have helped shape and develop the project. And in her own words, she said she's a passionate advocate of celebrating the heritage of everyday lives of the past and sharing the enjoyment of words. So over to you, Kath.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you for inviting me and Nick to your open bunch. I shall share with you some snippets from the Dialect and Heritage project, and just explain a bit about the archives which started this all off. So if I can share my screen, the magic of Zoom, hopefully you will see my presentation. How's that? Great. Good. You're not looking at the presentation view, because that would be embarrassing. So yeah, as Simon says, I'm the project manager for the Dialect and Heritage project, which is based here at the University of Leeds School of English, and it was a project that was started by Professor Fiona Douglas of the School of English a number of years ago. I'm not sure if Fiona is here. She said she might pop in and make a presence known, but she may not be here. Anyway, move on. Just a bit of background about the actual project and the Leeds Archive of Vernacular Culture. It's actually made up of two components. So the Survey of English Dialects, which was originated by Harold Orton in 1946, Harold Orton and Eugen Diept, who created a questionnaire to capture the words, dialect words from across the country at the time, because Harold Orton felt that after the war, some words that had been preserved in very isolated rural areas were at risk of being lost as people were being more mobilized, as people were moving around for jobs, as mechanization took over a lot of jobs in agriculture. People were moving around and were at risk of losing a lot of these words. So he sent out 9 field workers across the country, armed with 1,300 questions, to go and find respondents or find people with good dialect in locations across the country. They actually went to 313 different locations, majoritively in the 1950s. They didn't ask each recipient or each volunteer all of the questions, but they were broken down into different groups of subjects, such as farming or domestic life, and you can imagine which gender was asked about that one in the 1950s. So they also collected the audio recordings. They went back, and when technology allowed, to be able to make recordings of people of the period. They created these notebooks. They found new newspaper cuttings on the subject, and then later on at the University of Leeds, the Institute of Dialect and Folklife Studies was created, and that added to the Survey of English Dialects with studies on domestic and rural life, local trades, beliefs, customs, and those two elements actually make up the Leeds Archive of Vernacular Culture. So the Dialect and Heritage project received funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and as I said, was started by Fiona Douglas, but working in partnership with the Brotherton Library Special Collections here at Leeds, and 5 partner museums. So this map on the left here shows you all the small black dots are the locations that the field workers went out to in the 50s and early 60s. And then you can see the museums that we partnered with for this project. So the idea was that we digitized the archive, all of the response books, all of the material, the photographs, the audio recordings, and then we took them back to the public and the people that the word had given the words to us, because Fiona very much believed that the words belong to the people. And I agree. And I think that by doing a series of engagement events and activities, we could give those things back, that heritage back to people. We could also conduct a new survey, so similar to the SED, and in fact included some of the same questions in the SED, the original SED, that we could find out what words people were using today, and perhaps which words had been preserved and which words had been lost. How did they stay within families, but also maybe find some new dialect words. So really, really ambitious projects that the public took to in a phenomenal way. And we needed volunteers to achieve all these ambitious objectives. So the project objectives were set. And outcomes were, put down on paper in terms of what was wanted to be achieved, but we couldn't do it without volunteers. So we went on the ground. We put engagement officers in each of the museums. They went to make partnerships and find people in the local communities that were interested in volunteering and taking part. We looked at all of the tasks of the project in terms of what we wanted to achieve, and we broke them down into roles. And some roles needed more training, which we then provided and commissioned people to come and provide training in those localities. And some, they were more straightforward. So right through from interviewing people, learning how to conduct an oral history interview or even transcribing it, right the way through to, if you just want to have a few copies of the printed survey or some posters and take them to your local library, or if you wanted to share the project on your Facebook group, we were asking people to be ambassadors as well of the project. We provided placements for students and also opportunities for students at Leeds to get involved with the research of the project within the material of the LABC, and also to deliver some oral history events. And this little picture is just a few of the volunteers that actually took part in the project. The project itself held over 250 different events across the country. Now, bearing in mind this project was delivered during, the majority of it was meant to be delivered during COVID. We couldn't go out and meet people face to face, so we did a lot of the digitisation work as when COVID was happening. But as soon as lockdown was lifted, we were ready to go out with events. People were hungry for events that they could go to, and we toured the country in the Food Museum in East Anglia, toured around East Anglia and took interactive objects from the museum, things that they had in their collection that resonated with the items in the LABC. So here you can see two ladies listening to the audio recordings of some of the dialect words around food or domestic life. They had interactive digital displays that people could explore the collections, which made it fun and made it really engaging and interesting for people to take part in, or people to give us their words. One of the reasons that we chose a lot of the museums that we did was because they held artifacts and objects in their collections that actually resonated with a lot of the things that were talked about in the LABC, particularly in the survey of English dialects. So we have here an example where things have been identified and described by volunteers, by members of the public. So on the right hand side is an object that is used or was held, in the Weald Downman Museum, and we collected the name for that item from around the country. In the centre you can see it's called a horse tree or a land tree, a rock tree, a single tree, a baticle, which is my favourite, draft, cut with, and it's used for ploughing. In the middle, you can see our animal supervisor, Andy, at Weald Downman Museum, ploughing with his 3 horses, using this implement in real life today. So what this did, what the archive did, what the pieces from the collection, they were brought together And by digitizing the words and sharing these items from the archive, people could really get a feel for the objects and really brought the heritage alive and made it much more engaging and entertaining. In the response books that I mentioned that the field workers completed, and they were talking to participants around the country, they used illustrations, so such as the drawing of a plough on the other side, so that on the side of the slide, so that people could see what they were referring to, but you wouldn't give them the word plough, they would see what word they had for plough. Or in the response book, some of the volunteer participants actually drew their own little picture or diagram of the piece of equipment, or the part of a piece of equipment that they had a word for, just to make it very, very clear what they were talking about and what they were referring to. Again, here we have things that are identified and described from collections. So here's a photograph of a party of farm workers taking the open lunch topic or title of this event. Quite literally, a party of farm workers here and their families having beavers in 1908. And that photograph's in the collection at the Food Museum. And then we have here a recording of George Metson from Doddinghurst in Essex talking about beavers. And I'll just share a little bit of this audio with you.
Oh, yes, I'm going to go. I mean, half past 10 for beaver, and I had to leave off at 2:30 in the afternoon, and then I had the rest of the day to think so about bed about 3 o'clock.
So bringing beaver, the word for lunch or a snack or a packed lunch food that people had in the fields, bringing that to life in an interactive and really interesting way. So our volunteers, as well as all the roles of transcribing and conducting oral history, some of them actually did some genealogy research to find descendants of our original volunteer participants. So actually, crowdsourcing for this project goes way back to the 1950s, where we had people volunteering to be interviewed in the original survey of English dialects. And without those hundreds of people, we wouldn't have the collection of words that we have today. So Arthur Agar was an original participant in the survey of English dialects from Egton in Yorkshire. And here is a digitized image of the digitized response book from the collection. You can see that actually, if we hadn't digitized these for people to be able to access, thumbing through these, it was going to wear it out. The material was going to fall apart, so it wasn't going to last forever. But digitizing it means that it will. And our volunteers found Alan Agar, Arthur's grandson, and Alan volunteered to be interviewed. And as part of his interview, he was played the recording of his grandfather, and he had never heard it before. And he became very emotional and wanted to hear the voice of his grandfather and wanted to share it with his family and his brother. So I'll just play you a little bit of Arthur and a little bit of his grandson, Alan.
I have to remember a chap flying a cold, and when he got it home, it was Lynn. I said, if you wanted catching in, he said, go to the expert. Yes, it's fun. You can do it again, he got it home.
And this is Alan.
Tell me about your grandfather. Do you remember much about him? Well, yeah, he was a small shop. He was a hard-working bloke, like he was, you know, he was like, I mean, I can remember him at 69 years old. I was about 12 of them. Yeah, he was always, he looked after anything. organised my granny and all. She contributed to everything. She would make butter and sell it at butchers used to call every week. Whatever, sell a few odd ends, eggs, all such a blog like. Yeah, he was a big showman, like his cattle and his short horns, and he talks about the big short horns. There were little things with short legs that I remember up and his Scotch blackface sheep. He loved them and all. And he bred some goodness and all of it. Like, I did have some photos of his sheep somewhere.
That's Arthur and Alan. And during the interviews, we went on to ask Alan some questions from the new Great Big Dialect Hunt survey. And in the 1950s, in fact, in 1950, in November, Arthur Agar was asked questions. And on the left-hand side of this column, you can see the responses written down, responses to the questions written down in IPA. So they were captured the way that they were said, the sound that the words made accurately. And then any comments by the field worker were written down on the right-hand side. There's a little biographical note there for Arthur, that actually for each of the participants and informants, the original volunteers, it's a really beautiful and rich piece of heritage for anybody interested in family or social history. And each participant has a small biographical note in the response books. We also found Jennifer, and Jennifer is Jack's granddaughter. In fact, this is Jennifer in the photograph. The photograph belongs to Jennifer, and without the project, without the archive and the audio recording of Jack, which we have, we wouldn't have found Jennifer, and we wouldn't have the photograph of Jack Kitson. That's hers. We wouldn't have an image of the man and the informant, or the man behind the voice in the Survey of English Dialects recording. And these are just a few examples of the people that we've been able to connect, that have been able to reach back into the past and listen to the voices of long dead ancestors, and just have an incredibly magical experience. Here's Ruth Kitchen's descendant, Daphne Todd. Oftentimes people brought their own photographs and obviously their stories of their ancestors and their families. So there was the training that I talked about earlier. So volunteers were rewarded with skills in some ways. They were rewarded through emotional journeys or emotional experiences that were really powerful. And some of them learned things as well, or by itself. Volunteering on the project is an exchange, very much a give and take. The project was built on a very firm principle that every stakeholder, everybody, every individual that got involved with the project had to get something from the experience. So the project could create a space where the volunteers could benefit, and by building the project from this principle, creative opportunities can emerge. For example, by asking volunteers in North Yorkshire to come forward, or working with volunteer libraries in North Yorkshire, they then went on, the library service went on to develop a project and get more funding. We seed funded it and supported it, and they worked with community groups from housing associations and from MenCap to produce their own digital videos and outputs, or works of art that meant something to them, that they could explore their dialect and their identity with. There's also the legacy of leaving people in the community who have those skills and experience of delivering things like oral history interviews or transcriptions that can then go on to be used in future collections or future exhibitions of museums, or actually go on to do their own projects. We have a number of spin-off projects from the Dialect and Heritage project that people have been inspired to go on and do. The relationship with volunteers is very much two-way. It's all about communication. You talk to them at the beginning and find out what they expect or what they would like to achieve or to experience or to gain by being involved in the project. Talk to them through the middle of the project. Ask them if they're okay, if they need anything, do they need any help, is everything clear? Are there any challenges that you can perhaps help them overcome or provide a way around, a workaround? And then talk to them at the end and find out if there were any surprises, any surprising benefits, or any surprising things that they've experienced through the project. Some people have reported making friends or meeting people they never would have met before, people in their own communities that they haven't met before, but they now have firm friendships with. They like the opportunity just to sit down and talk and think about words and think about how similar the connections between people. To find volunteers and to keep them, my advice is go to their best channel. Sorry, it's a bit of marketing speak, but go to where they are. Go find them. For us, it was museums, record collection offices, it was libraries, it was schools, the university. But wherever the people are that you feel may have an interest in volunteering or giving something to your project, you go to them, and always take feedback. It's really, really important to listen to the volunteers and listen to their challenges, listen to the things that they've enjoyed, and see how you can apply that learning across your project. So I just wanted to leave you with my final slide, which is images of some of the volunteers that have taken part in the project, and with a little bit of an audio recording of one of our engagement officers who worked with volunteers to collect oral histories and to train people to collect oral histories. She was very active in the community up in North Yorkshire. And I think in terms of the benefits for volunteers, yes, training, yes, skills, yes, learning, but some of the benefits can be incredibly surprising, but deeply, deeply rewarding.
I'm struggling to hear that, Kath. Others are saying so in the I don't know the
Sorry.
recordings or. But
Much I can do at this end, it's as loud as it will go, I'm afraid.
yeah.
I can paraphrase.
Yeah.
That's all right. Sorry, Claire. So that's Claire, who was an engagement officer, and basically she was talking about how privileged she felt to be part of the project, to how important it is to capture stories from people in the community, everyday stories that they don't think are important, but they are a window into their lives and into their own personal histories. And she talks about a dementia patient that she went to visit and have a session with, and their carer, who happened to be their daughter, came along to the interview. And this volunteer who volunteered his time to talk to us, he could recall skating on ice of the Thames when it had frozen over when he was a child. He couldn't recall what had happened last week, but he could recall those memories from his childhood. And his daughter wrote some feedback to Claire to say that it was an incredibly powerful moment for them, because it enabled them to have a conversation, and it enabled them to be able to speak to each other about things, and enabled them to find a connection in a very difficult time in their lives. So benefits to volunteers can be tangible, or they can be intangible, and they can be deeply, deeply rewarding. So I'll leave it there.
That's great. Thank you. I'm just hoping we don't have any more audio mishaps now. I think I think Alex is back with us. Thanks for persevering, Alex.
Thanks ever so much, Kath. I think that was excellent, and you answered one. I had a question prepared just in case nobody had any questions, and you answered it really comprehensively. So I'll have to think of another question for after the next session. So thanks ever so much, and we'll have questions for Kath at the end. But if you've got any questions now, so you don't lose them, if you can stick them in the chat, and then we'll come back to them after Alex has spoken. So the next speaker is Alex Pesaro from the University of Lincoln, and Alex. Research and teaching activities are in the sphere of digital humanities and cultural heritage management. And he's the digital archivist at the International Bomber Command Centre Digital Archive, which is curated by the University of Lincoln. And Alex is going to discuss the sort of role of volunteers within the project. And over to you, Alex. And thankfully we can hear you now, so that's great. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Great. So I'm going to
share. Yeah. Thanks for persevering.
Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. Can you see the presentation on screen?
We can indeed. At least I can.
All right. Thanks. So let's get started. So, apology for the technical mishap, and let's get started. Okay, Royal Air Force Bomber Command. Bomber Command was the bombing component of the Royal Air Force, roughly 1936 to 1968. During the Second World War, 1939-1944, Bomber Command was tasked with the strategic bombing of Europe. It is indeed a difficult heritage. One, because of high losses, 58,000, and also complicated memorialization. Veterans resented the way they have been remembered in post-war Britain. It is also an example of contested legitimacy. Think of the bombing of Dresden, Feb 1945. It has been controversial ever since. And also, in some places, the bombing war has always been profoundly divisive. Think of Italy. Italy was bombed first as an enemy and then as an ally. I'll put a link for you to delve deeper into this dichotomy. The IBCC Digital Archive is hosted at and managed by the University of Lincoln in partnership with the International Bomber Command Center, hence the acronym. Traditionally, memorialization of Bomber Command in England has been very focused. A specific station, a specific military unit, highly decorated people, or important events. Our scope is very broad. We aim to memorialize Bomber Command from a broad perspective. And furthermore, we stick to an history from below approach. So we focus on the common humanity of ordinary people caught up in the bombing war. So we have documents, photos, life history of civilians and personnel from both sides. So we have Royal Air Force stories and also Italian stories and German stories as well. The IBCC Digital Archive is essentially a meta-archive of personal papers. We have no physical counterpart. We are not a brick-and-mortar archive, which means that collections are digitized and then returned to their owners. They are cherished heirlooms. There is embedded Creative Commons license. The archive has been designed since the onset with data sharing in mind. At the moment, we have more than 30,000 items available online, including photos, documents, and objects. Among them, over than 1,200 oral history interviews, mostly full text searchable, quite unusual. And also multiple entry points for people, places by using maps, dates, timeline, and also topics. Now, issues. look at the photo on the right-hand side of the screen. I'm afraid this is the exception. It's very rare that we get a collection so organized, a collection that has not been culled, arranged, expanded, merged, and split over time. So it's very rare that we get something completely undisturbed. And also, heritage is family heirloom. So we got a lot of photos that are uncaptioned or with captions that are completely generic and largely unusable, something like dad's service or something like that. There's lack of context. Collections were never intended for sharing, so people captured only essential information. This is why we have a multi-tier management, permanent university staff, and then volunteers attached to the archive, essentially people who come in on a regular basis or people we're in touch with, and then an outer layer, a indistinct crowd of contributors. Why? Because of a responsibility towards organizations, donors, and archive items. We simply cannot accept a model whereby anyone can edit the archive Wikipedia style the way they like. Why? Because items cannot speak for themselves, and so they need someone who can do it vicariously. This is why we have a hard control vocabulary, places, pieces of equipment, aircraft, and also a soft control vocabulary, which is essentially the archive voice. For instance, we have it, not she for aircraft, operation, not raid, First Nations, not aborigine. The trouble is, in delivering the archive, we have two workflows. One is a serial workflow, a sequence of steps starting from the moment we have an item ready for digitization and ending with the moment that item eventually appears online. But then we have a parallel workflows, all actions meant to improve quality and usability. There are repeated passes, sometimes even overlapping. So the archive doesn't improve in a linear fashion, but rather in a cumulative way. Well, the reason that is so complicated, because the archive grows, expands in size according to a serious workflow, which is very easy to capture, highly measurable, and then standard project management techniques are totally adequate. But also what improves archive usability, and I'm talking about identification of places, is all based on parallel workflows, which is terribly difficult to measure, almost impossible to be captured in figures, because it's based on feedback and feed-forward loops. So management has an element of complexity. In essence, we operate according to two modes. There is a push mode in which the archive reaches out for people or online communities. So staff initiate the workflow. Or we can have a pull mode in place. Basically, we make the archive hospitable to contributions. We invite people to provide identifications or to suggest edits. In this case, users initiate the workflow. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Number one is an uncaptioned aerial photo believed to be Canada. It has been identified as a very tiny hamlet and also overlapped on an online map, allowing direct access to this item. Number two, I think that is quite extraordinary. Contextual information pointed to Italy and it has been conclusively identified as Udine, northern Italy, by matching the stonework and the drain pipe that are still present. Third example, I think this is nothing short than extraordinary. An incaptioned photo believed to be India, identified as a specific railway station in Mumbai. And this has been submitted by an external contributor. And this will give you a sense of the time and dedication that this outer layer of contributors have. So we get lots of annotated Google Street View photos and sometimes supplemented by long and detailed explanations of the process. Now, how we can increase engagement? Number one is focus on intrinsic reward. So we use personalized messages of thanks. Every email is very personalized. Online credit, every identification is public. Sometimes we ask them to co-author blog post or to reuse what they did for teaching and scholarly purposes, which normally makes them very, very happy and proud. Then we lower barriers to participation. Simplicity, we believe, is key. A confused contributor provides nothing of value. So there is a call to action displayed on every page. Can you help us? Can you improve this? And there is a mystery item section prominently on the home page. Then we introduce an element of challenge and gamification. So we frame it not as a chore, but as an intriguing mystery to be solved. Can you outsmart us? We tried for months and we drew a blank. Can you help us? It has been very effective. Then there is an emphasis on the collective dimension. We're not asking them to help me, a specific member of staff, but to support a bigger enterprise. So we found that people are more willing to engage when they contribute to something that is bigger than themselves, and also bridge differences. We might be detached, professional, workmanlike, but every now and again we get people who talk for hours simply because they have an absorbing passion. And sometimes we get something useful out of that. So contribution, every now and again, is the byproduct of something else. And finally, an element of respect. In a university environment, we normally are rewarded for output. We need a mindset shift. Dealing with volunteers, we need to reward effort that is absolutely output independent. Now, I'm going to problematizing it a bit by raising some items. Where does it fit? Actually, it's quite complicated because there is an ongoing debate, quality versus quantity. Should we try to publish online as many items as possible, or should we improve the quality of what is already available? Every identification problem is solvable provided we have enough time and we involve enough people. Is this the most sensible thing to do when we are conflicting requirements? Can you sense a but coming? Yes, there is, and it's fairly big. It requires substantial admin work. Emailing, exchanging messages, checking sources, and editing metadata online, but also blurred authority boundaries. How do you feel when you are no longer the most knowledgeable people in the room? So the power of the crowd, as we say, sometimes trumps professional expertise. So authority is shared and also negotiated. And finally, fluidity. The archive is more a collective creation that is perpetually evolving and never fully established. So the recommendation is to embrace messiness, instability in archive work. Well, there's an element of imbalance. Everyone wants to identify something about a famous operation, but then what happened in other theaters can be very, very difficult to get identified simply because very few people cared about, say, North Africa. We had a lot of success with contributors in the UK, in the United States, Australia, and further afield. In Europe, we haven't been so lucky. And finally, there's an element of bias because we have few contributions from a lot of people and a lot of contribution for a handful of contributors. So the archive is also reflecting their interests and biases as well. So give it a try. And can you outsmart us? Can you do better than what we are trying to do since 2017? I put a link, give it a go, and there are hundreds of photos that are still waiting to be identified. Finally, last slide, there are opportunities for collaboration. A, scholarly work, especially joint bidding for grants. One topic I can think of is corpus analysis. We have a 1 million word corpus still unexplored, and also minority history, Black personnel, women, children in wartime. We can also offer digital humanities internship for students, either remote or on-site, and we have a number of roles: proofreading, metadata, geolocation, working with maps, oral history, etc. And finally, partnership to expand coverage, especially Eastern, Southern Europe. Our coverage is very much substandard, plus the Mediterranean, and also civilian experience of the bombing war outside Europe. And this concludes my presentation. You're more than welcome to get in touch with me, and I've put a couple of useful links for you to explore. Many thanks for your time and attention, and apologies for the technical difficulties.
Thanks ever so much, Alex. That was great. And I know what I'm going to be doing with my spare time this weekend. He's excellent. And thanks to both speakers. I think some really interesting points about why people volunteer, what the rewards are for volunteering on projects like this, and some of the biases or some of the problems that we encounter when we're working with communities where sometimes voices aren't equal or some voices aren't there at all in those projects. So we need to think about those things. So we've got some questions coming through. I just wanted to start with a very brief question to both of you, which is just really in projects that I've been involved with, one of the biggest problems we've always had is around contested issues. So it could be around a difficult heritage like aerial bombing, or with ownership of language and ownership of culture that relates to language. So had either of you got any thoughts on that notion of dealing with the contestation that might come in from working with volunteers?
Can I go?
Yeah, sorry, Alex. Yes, fine. Yeah.
I mean, we had this issue, and sometimes it has been framed as an ethical issue in using volunteers' input. Our volunteers are from a very, very specific demographics, almost invariably former RAF personnel living locally with a keen, sometimes absorbing interest in Bomber Command. So, whereas our approach is broader, is more inclusive, and we have a broader scope. One of the way we have solved that is to implement a hybrid model in the archive. So we have a set of definitions So the archive is like an encyclopedia, and then there are starting points for specific concepts, places, and idea. So instead of allowing people to explore the archive from every possible angle, concepts have been defined beforehand. So volunteers don't have to create a description from scratch. So they don't explain what a Lancaster was, what it was meant to do, but they just add information about a specific photograph of a specific letter. In this way, we can anchor contributions around what we want to tell, which is neutrality, inclusivity, but at the same time, including contributions from multiple sources. So far, it has proved to be successful, even though it requires substantial admin work.
Thank you. Great. And Kathy, do you have any thoughts on that?
Just to concur about the substantial admin work. But I think that our approach has been very to be maximally inclusive too. So where in the original SED, the majority of people that were interviewed or volunteers that we looked for were white men with good teeth, so they could pronounce the words. We wanted words from everybody, and everybody's contribution was valid. If it's your word that your gran used, or that she passed down, or if it's your word that you made up, we wanted to hear from all of those words. So by including them in our collection, and by asking for new words and for individuals' words, we were giving them permission to own them. Or they already had their permission to own them, but they were sharing them with us. So ethically and morally, they belong to the public, and we've always stood by that principle: is the words belong to the people. That if you say that word belongs to you, it belongs to you. There's no argument.
Great, thanks. And we'll move on to the questions in the chat now. So I think Nick had a couple of questions that he put in early on. So if Nick, if you want to ask your question or questions.
Yeah, well, there was just one question, because it's the license you use is CC by NC, I think, Alex, and
Yeah, correct.
I kind of guess that's necessary in many cases because you don't know the provenance, perhaps, of them. Is there any material that could be released under a more liberal license, or is that not really an option?
I mean, we are walking a very, very fine dividing line, because the question is very clear for oral history interviews. We know exactly who is the creator. It's relatively straightforward for letters, diaries, and logbooks, but we enter a very difficult territory for in dealing with photographs. We have addressed this question in a very pragmatic way, implementing a robust takedown policy that has been used a couple of times.
Thanks.
I mean, just I totally understand that, but because obviously potentially it would increase the reach, wouldn't it, of the archive? I guess if you could license them under more liberal licenses, but yeah, I understand that. And you've already alluded to this, I guess, but I just wondered how many contributors over time have you had? You suggested, it's people with a sort of active interest in the RAF, etc. But is it tens of people or hundreds of people, or?
It's more likely hundreds of people. I mean, it's very difficult to track because we have contributors that are regularly in touch with us, and then we have people who contribute every now and again, and they probably disappear for years. And sometimes people want to contribute without a formal affiliation to the archive or the university.
Great, thanks for that. Thank you. I think Fiona, did you have a question about corpus?
I was just saying I'm really interested in knowing more about the corpus because I'm a corpus linguist with my other hat on.
So please get in touch, and I would be absolutely delighted to talk you through what we have. The reason we have such a substantial corpus is that pretty much every oral history interview is fully transcribed. And then, if I remember correctly, 65% of the documents we have, including letters and diaries and memoirs, are fully transcribed as well. So there are many potentials. There are many opportunities for collaboration.
Sounds really interesting. I will have a look.
So get in touch, and then I'll talk you through.
Great, thanks. Thank you. I think the next question comes from Ben, and it's for Kath. So if you want to ask the question, Ben.
I would answer the question to Ben, but I'm going to throw it out to Fiona, because Fiona, I am not the academic. Fiona is the academic. I look after the project, but Fiona is the person to talk to about any of the research.
So Ben's question in the chat is, did you observe any changes related to migration? People from other places may have different pronunciations or have brought their own dialects here. That's a really good question, and that's one of the things we're really interested in. So, you know, most people think that you just have the dialect you have because of where you're from, but of course we move around much more. And when we encounter new people, perhaps we start to adopt, particularly their words, perhaps less so their pronunciations. So we had kind of two strands running through the research. One was words that might have come down to you through your family. So I've got words from my grandparents who were kind of dead before I was born, but I use them and I shouldn't have them because they're from somewhere else. So we looked at inherited words, but we also looked at borrowed words. So those words that perhaps you pick up as you move around the country, or you engage with people from different places, and in a sense you adopt them and you put them in your linguistic suitcase. So we have done the data collection for that. We only finished the project at the end of December, and so we haven't yet got to analyse that data. I think it's going to be really interesting. So I would like us to look and see, you know, are there kind of journeys of dialect across place? I suspect there really are, but I can't give you the answer to that yet. But I think it's something that's been largely ignored in dialectology and sociolinguistics. So more to come later.
Is Emily still in? Emily, would you like to ask your question? You're next. Or would you like me to ask it?
It's okay, I can ask it. I'm aware I have to run off to the school run in a second, but thank you very much for both of your talks. Really, really interesting. I'm an amateur genealogist, I'm going to confess that. Have either of you tapped into that community for volunteers and engagement? Because the amount of responses you can get from there, people are just really interested, especially when it relates to their own sort of families. And I know, Kathleen, you touched on that, but I just wondered if that's a community perhaps for engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, finding the descendants, we had volunteers who were amateur genealogists, and they found relatives of the original survey of English dialects for us. I've had hours and hours of conversations with people about local history and connections with families, and families that have either moved away. And one of the things that we wanted to do, as well as put the words back and the photographs and the richness of the LABC back to the public, was through the project website, dialectandheritage.org, is to provide a map that people can click on. So if you're interested, if your family came from a particular geographical area, you can click on that geographical area, or the village nearest to, or the place nearest to where you were from, and find the people and families that find the people that provided or were informants or volunteered back then. And we've included the little biographical snippets of each one. So there are, to me, as again, self-confessed amateur genealogist, finding something that talks about my ancestor, that says what they did for a living, and if they're a nice person, and if they, you know, were chatty, or whether they had a cold that day, it would just be priceless. So very, very interested in interacting with amateur genealogist communities. And as we move forward, we hopefully there'll be more partnerships and ways to work with and reach out to those people.
Thank you.
Brilliant. And I think we're virtually out of time, but I've just got one very quick question, if I might, at the end, because there are no more questions in the chat. It's really interesting, Alex, that you mentioned a tool like Amica, which is a tool that I use a lot with community projects for archive building. And there are obviously other things like Zooniverse that are out there for doing projects that you can set up material on and crowdsource information around. Have either of you got any other recommendations for other sort of open source tools or approaches that other people might find useful for projects?
Amica has proven to be a very reliable platform. at the moment, we are sticking to it, and we have no plans to migrate to another.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I would sorry, just add that we commissioned the design of our project website to enable a plugin that would collect, people could actually audibly contribute their words. So they could upload their voices saying their words that we could capture. And so that's something that we can use and play back on the website. So whether that's the same thing, I appreciate it's not potentially great for comparisons, but it is a really useful tool.
Because it's really good to hear about how people are using tools, and lots of people are spending lots of money making things when there are already good things out there or things that can be adapted. So I think one of my frustrations is always trying to get people to say what works for them and what's good, and try and share that sort of knowledge for everybody else as well. So that's really good to hear that you're both finding those sorts of ways of doing those things. Just wanted to say thank you ever so much for coming and for bearing with the sort of technical difficulties we've had. But could everybody give our two speakers a virtual or an actual round of applause? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. And I will write it up for the library blog and post the recording up there as well. So thanks, Alex, for coming along, and hopefully speak to you again about some of this work as well. I'm certainly interested, in learning more about the archive and the. Is it still ongoing, Kath?
Yes, absolutely. It's an ongoing process. We have signed a partnership agreement that will cover us for the next 20 years.
And the Dialect Heritage one, Kath, is that still?
It's still going. Skeleton staff still manning the ship of Dialect, and hopefully for the majority of this year, and currently looking at potential funding opportunities to keep going, keep doing more, because there are many more words out there that we'd like to collect and explore.
No, that's great. Thanks. I'll stop the recording now. I won't run off straight away. I always think it's very odd when somebody just closed down Zoom, and if you're in a room, you wouldn't do that, would you? So, but obviously people will start leaving now for the next meetings. But